The history of pizza has plagued many of us, and lots of questions arise as to how this thing started existing. Welcome to episode 18 of Dyllon Explains Everything. My name's Dylan. In case you couldn't tell by the title, I'm the one explaining everything, including the topic of today, the history of pizza. I'm going to be running through a lot of facts, so if you're curious as to where I get my information, be sure to check the description below for a list of links. In case you don't know what pizza is, well, I guess I can explain it. Basically, it's a thin piece of dough, specifically pizza dough, topped with a sauce, then some cheese, and then toppings that include meats, vegetables, and controversially fruits like pineapple. This whole arrangement is then placed in an oven where it is heated for a long time and then placed in a cardboard box where it's then sent out with a delivery person to someone's house, though sometimes they do serve them in places like restaurants where you sit down and eat it. Obviously, the ability to change the dough, sauce, cheese, and toppings of the pizza makes it a huge hit. In fact, in the US alone, 3 billion pizzas are sold each year on average. And that is 46 slices per person in the US. There's a total of around 77,000 pizzerias in 2019 in the United States. 4,650 of them were in Pennsylvania, which has the most amount of pizzerias per capita or per person. But 7,125 of them were in California, which has the most pizzerias in all. This, of course, makes a huge profit. In the US alone, $46 billion a year are made by pizza companies, and $27 billion of that is in the top 50 restaurant chains. And worldwide, it makes a whole $145 billion a year. That's ridiculous. So where did all of this come from? Well, in order to find that out, we need to go back to the Neolithic Era, when people were using stone tools to do things. Basically, people found out about flatbread and started putting certain things on it and experimenting with it. Ancient Romans and Egyptians started putting sauces and toppings on their flatbread, whereas ancient Greeks would actually put herbs and oils on their flatbread, eating them that way. All of this culminated together to produce putting stuff on flatbread as a huge trend. Putting more sauces and toppings on flatbreads and serving it as a meal began in a place now known as Naples, though back in the 7th century BC, it would have been known as Neapolis, which is Greek for new city. This was one of the many Greek colonies that were being made at the time. Many poets actually came from Neapolis and were called the Neapolitan poets, and later there would also be many artists and musicians. Neapolitan ice cream gets its name from Neapolis. Now, just like many Greek colonies at the time, Neapolis was eventually conquered by the Romans. Fun fact before we move on, the reason Neapolis was named New City is because there was another city made right by Neapolis before Neapolis called Paleopolis, which translates to Old City. The fact that they made a new city and named it Old City so that they could make a new city named New City makes no sense. Or too much sense. Anyhoosers, back in 4th century BC, Naples became a huge Greek culture hub even though it was conquered by Romans, and it became a huge place for tourism to thrive. In fact, many Roman emperors actually vacationed to Naples in their free time. This shows how popular Naples was even before it started making pizza. Skipping forward about a millennium, the Spanish Habsburgs took over Naples, and that was one of the biggest ruling houses of Spain. They were known for being weird, and then, after them, came the Spanish Bourbons, which was another big house, and Naples became the capital of a small kingdom in the south. At this point, around the 18th century, Naples started a big art school, making artists, writers, and musicians that started coming out of Naples and making amazing, great works. This also made the population of Naples balloon. The population got so big that over the course of 50 years, it grew by 100,000 people, which also increased the amount of people that were in poverty, called the Lazzaroni, after people who look like Lazarus. This continued the trend of poor people eating pizza. It was pretty cheap and it had a lot of variability in its size, allowing you to get enough for either you or your entire family for not much money. Now, these weren't the pizzas that we know today. Basically, in order to make these pizzas good for people who didn't have a lot of money, they found common but tasty ingredients even though most of the early pizzas were actually only topped with garlic, lard, and salt. But sometimes they would also include basil, cheese, or some other fancy toppings, but most of the time they didn't, simply because it was supposed to be for poor people. Finally, they started putting tomatoes on pizza, and America actually got a taste of the pizza, even though a lot of chefs and normal people actually shunned eating pizza because it was supposed to be cheap and simple, made for poor people. People like Samuel Morse, the guy who made the telegraph, actually scorned eating pizza because of how disgusting it was to them. And in the 19th century, when cookbooks started coming out, they actually left pizza out even though it was a really popular item. The change of this started happening in 1861 with the unification of Italy, and then continued in 1889 when King Umberto I and Queen Margherita visited Naples. They had gotten so tired of their normal meals that the Queen actually asked for an assortment of different pizzas. The pizza that had become Queen Margherita's favorite had tomatoes, basil, and cheese on it, representing the colors of the Italian flag. This pizza combination later became known as the Margherita pizza or Pizza Margherita, after Queen Margherita. This all started a pizza craze in Naples. Tons of people were wanting to eat pizza, and it actually became known as a good food inside of Naples. It wasn't until the 20th century when it became well known outside of Naples. Basically, the Industrial Revolution happened and tons of factories were made, and after a while they started needing more and more jobs, so people that were from Naples, or the Neapolitan people, started looking for these jobs and took their cuisine with them, spreading the word of pizza. This interested Americans, who started replacing the toppings, cheeses, and sauces with their own, especially in northern places like New York, where it was a huge hit. And in 1905, the first American pizzeria was opened, Gennaro Lombardi's. By the 30s, pizzerias were spreading all over the place, from Boston to Manhattan to New Jersey, as Italian Americans realized that Americans love this stuff. And with World War II happening, this spread from East Coast to West Coast. Pizza became less of a nice treat from Italy and more of a fast food item, as non-Neapolitan places created variations of pizza, including in California, which started making barbecue chicken and salmon on pizza. Even outside of America, as Neapolitans started looking for jobs spreading north into Europe, they spread the pizza with them. Now, this didn't start a huge craze, but it definitely spread the idea. After the war, pretty much everywhere started picking up the pizza craze, including Italy, which had still been absent from this even though Naples was inside of Italy this entire time. The reason for this was because soldiers from America or going into America wanted to taste pizza outside of America, and therefore spread the craze as they went to other countries, spreading the pizza empire even more. In fact, the first gas-firing oven was made by a soldier. This wasn't the only reason that pizza was spreading. As traveling prices became cheaper and cheaper, people wanted to explore more cuisines from other countries, especially Italy, which had lots of pastas and pizzas. The huge hit of pizza in places like Naples caused a lot of non-Neapolitan places to start producing pizza in order to get the same amount of tourism that went to there. However, this just made them another pizza restaurant. But in order to compete, they started varying up their flavors and toppings on their pizza, which caused the prices to go up and up to where we know them today. Eventually, pizza chains started popping up one after the other, starting with Pizza Hut in '58, Little Caesars in '59, and Domino's in 1960, ending with Papa John's in 1989. Even though Domino's remains the highest earning pizza company, all of them are expanding greatly. In 2019, Pizza Hut alone made 1,000 locations in China. And restaurants aren't even the only places we get pizza. A lot of people get pizza frozen. And frozen pizzas came out around 1957, right before the restaurant era of pizza. This worked because people started having more money and excess income, wanting to spend it on things like comfort food or easily accessible food. And as technology got better, people were able to make more foods at home, allowing them to make pizza. This also meant that everything that was used to make pizza also got a huge boost in their economy, So in short, pizza was originally made for poor people on the go, but was enhanced by war and tourism, eventually becoming a huge comfort food across the world, boosting tons of economies, and becoming one of the biggest customizable foods to this day. Whether you like pizza or the history of pizza, or you just like watching my videos, because why not, you have to admit that pizza has boosted a lot of economies and changed the world to this day, and the world simply wouldn't be the same without it. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video just as much as soldiers and tourists enjoyed pizza, and if you did, be sure to let me know and stay tuned for my videos that come out every Saturday at 10 a.m. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions, be sure to leave them in the comments below. And remember, my name's Dylan, and I explain everything.